Hi, in this video we're going to talk about Yanester King's article where she's going to talk about women, science, environmentalism, and perhaps a good way to start this essay is with a little bit of a history on theories. This isn't in her essay, but I think it'll help contextualize it a bit. So when we human beings started to try to study the world around us, one of the first sciences we had of nature is what we call biology. Quite literally the study of life. Biology, though, was really a classification project, right? So these scientists, probably starting back in maybe the 1500s and really hitting its stride in maybe the 1700s, started traveling around the world, looking at different species, collecting examples of these organisms, oftentimes labeling them. They would give them these cool scientific names. They'd always have like this Latin name for these animals. The first one would be the common class of things. The second name would be what differentiated them from other things in the class. And if you found a brand new species that no one else had found, by goodness, that was cool because you got to name it, right? So you can go through Europe today and go visit all these natural history museums where the shelves and the different rooms are just filled with examples of organisms from all over the world. Right. Also, it's sort of odd in the study of biology, because most of you probably took biology, you spend a significant amount of time dissecting animals, right, to see how things work. Of course, it's odd. The study of life often entails looking at dead creatures, right? But again, it was a particular view we had of the universe, where somehow we had all of these organisms that had come into our world, right, all these animals. The next big shift from biology was sort of accidental. We shifted from biology into ecology. And I think one of the significant steps in this move from biology to ecology really had to do with the introduction of a pesticide, DDT, and a rather famous theorist by the name of Rachel Carson. She wrote a very important book called Silent Spring. And what she was noticing as a scientist is that this DDT that was being used by humans for all sorts of good purposes, that is, they were using DDT to get rid of pests in particular. They were using DDT very, very widely to kill mosquitoes, because they were aware at the time that mosquitoes were causing malaria, right? And if you can kill off the mosquitoes, well, it's a wonderful thing. You've just prevented a whole lot of pain and suffering, right? You got rid of malaria. But unbeknownst to the scientists who'd created this, they thought that it wasn't that harmful to human beings, right? So you see in like Belmont or areas near San Mateo where there are trucks driving down the streets in the 1940s and 1950s, and they're spraying DDT dust out of the back of the truck, and the little kids are out running through it and everything. Well, the problem that Carson's discovered is that DDT actually gets into the food chain. That is, it affects these insects. Oftentimes these insects are eaten by other insects. The toxic things just collect in the organisms. Then the problem was birds were eating these insects. And while it didn't kill the bird directly, it somehow affected their reproductive cycle in a way that it made it so that the shells of the bird's eggs wouldn't harden correctly. And lo and behold, it totally disrupted the bird's reproduction cycle. And thus the title of her book, right, Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring, right? So what we discovered with the use of DDT accidentally is that life is an interconnected web. And what we had done is screwed up a particular thread of that web, and it had had a huge consequences on the rest of the web. Phenomenal. Biology was wrong, right? Biology thought we had all these particular organisms. No, the amazing thing about our planet is it's a bunch of frickin' ecosystems, right? Systems of interconnectedness. Amazing stuff. So we switched our view, right? And we started looking at how animals depend on other animals. Well, the next problem was what good old King refers to as nature-culture dualism. This is a mistake. It's a thing she thinks that we ought to overcome. But nature-culture dualism was totally inherent when we first started studying ecology, because, well, let's see if we can explain what this is, what nature-culture dualism is. The other day I was going to a supermarket, and as I was getting ready to go in, I noticed a sign on the door that said, "No animals allowed," right? And I've taken a biology class. There's 5 major kingdoms, I think, in biology. The only 2 options that are big organisms are plants and animals, and I don't think I'm a plant. I'm an animal by God, right? But this sign in the front of the market was saying no animal. So what could it mean? Well, what it meant was that they had forgotten that human beings are part of the natural world. That's nature-culture dualism, right? Somehow we human beings thought that the world that we live in, the world of culture, is totally separate from the world of nature. So we even get all these words, right? Man-made versus natural, right? As though, again, we're somehow outside of it. Now, granted, that view of nature-culture dualism probably tied into our religious heritage. I mean, the religions that we inherited from our, those that came before us thought of us as being supernatural beings, right? That we, as the truck I drove by the other day said, we're not of this earth, right? We're supernatural. We have this immortal soul that makes it so that we're not part of the world. Regardless of whether that's true or false, the reality is that your survival on this planet depends upon the ecosystem that supports it, right? And again, this is what we had largely failed to recognize in the move toward ecology, right? So this gave rise to a new movement called social ecology, right? And what the social ecology wants to do is recognize that human beings depend upon the environment that supports them. The problem is that our culture, our economy, has been working to sort of imagine that we're on the top, the apex of a pyramid, right? All this stuff. We've been acting in a way that has been causing lots and lots of biological simplification, and as a result, as that pyramid underneath us becomes more and more reduced, our survival here as an apex predator becomes more and more vulnerable, right? So we've been living as though the earth was made for us, right? We've been living as though it's a giant playpen and we can do with it whatever we want. And what social ecologists are trying to teach us is, look, no, right? You got to come in. You've got to act in ways that actually scoot this back out, right? So for those of us who are lovers of spotted owls, or sometimes called tree huggers, right? It's not so much that we love trees. You could argue we love human beings, we love ourselves, but we realize that we live on a planet, right, where the trees sort of support us, right? And so rather than cutting them down and just turning them into lumber, we need to actively live in ways that don't deplete the ecosystem that supports it, but rather makes it bigger and even more diverse, right? So again, we have our history then. We start with biology. We move to social ecology because we start to recognize the connections. The third big move is into social ecology, where we realize, oh my goodness, we're part of it too. Right? Human actions connect up with this. Ecofeminism, what